How y'all doing today? My name is Greg Brainerd. I've been working in IT security and solutions since 1996. I've worked with America Online, Pennzoil, and Shell. At one point, Pennzoil was getting bought out by Shell, and when that happened, layoffs happened in oil and gas, and so my wife and I started our IT company. We've been servicing companies in the Houston metro area since 2002. So today we're going to talk about common email scams and how to protect your business. How many of you have fallen for a phishing scam in your life? I definitely have. So quite a while back, my wife and I went on a spending spree, and over the weekend, and we overdrafted our bank account. Not once, but 10 times over that time period. So we had $30 per transaction that we had to pay. So of course I'm pissed off, and I call the bank and I'm like, hey, what can I do about this? And the bank tells me, sorry, but you're just an idiot and there's nothing we can do about that. So at that point I'm angry, I hang up the phone and I get off, and I get an email kind of like this shortly thereafter that says, hey, we need to verify some information with your bank account. And I'm like, all right, whatever, what do I need to do? And I just click on it, log in, and I immediately notice the URL at the top is not my bank's website, and I felt like a complete idiot. So at that point, I'm like, I had to close the browser out, log in to the legitimate bank website, change my password, and luckily it was in a very short time period, so nothing was going on with that. But the lesson there is to slow down, pay attention, even when you're upset and angry about these kind of things, and it can happen to anybody. But just hover over those links, look at the from address bar, the from email address, and you can stop that. In 2021, the FBI's Internet Crime Division reported that business email compromise received about 20,000 complaints with an adjusted gross loss of about $2.4 billion. Has anybody here, called the FBI or registered anything with the FBI, reported something to them? No? Today we're going to talk about just some low-tech solutions to protect yourself from these high-tech scams. So I've got 4 different categories we're going to go over. The first one's going to be social engineering, not necessarily email, but we're going to talk about that. And so this is my dad, Steve. He passed away a couple of years ago, but before that, he got a call from Microsoft. Microsoft called him up and said, hey, your computer's got a virus on it. And so he's like, what? My computer's got a virus on it? So he said, well, what do I do? And so they walked him through going to a website so that he could allow them to remote into their computer. And then from there, they did some stuff and then cleaned up this virus that he had. So I'm talking to him on the phone about a week later, and I'm like, you got a call from Microsoft? What? And he's like, yeah, I got this call from Microsoft, and tells me all about it. And I'm like, Dad, that's a total scam. Nobody's going to be calling you from Microsoft because you've got a virus on your machine unless you called Microsoft first. And he's like, well, but I was just trying to do the right thing. I'm like, okay, Dad, well, you fell for a scam. So I remoted it into his computer, found the remote software that they had used, uninstalled it, ran some malware scans, and then I told him, I said, hey, Dad, you're gonna have to change all of your passwords. I don't know what their agenda was and what they were monitoring for, but you're gonna have to go ahead and change all those passwords. So he did, and nothing came of it after that I'm aware of. But social engineering is going to bypass all firewalls. Kevin Mitnick said this. He was a big hacker, went to jail for it, came out, now he's a security consultant. But in my dad's example, if you open the door, none of your security precautions that you have in place are going to stop that. You're just allowing them into the system. So you got to be very careful about that. Here's a text message that you may have seen run on Facebook. The UK government's asking you to pay $1,500 in gift cards or you're under the arrest. First of all, the government's not going to call you or text you about some gift cards. And if you get any kind of messages like this, not only in text messaging, maybe on your social media platform from Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, whatever, just ignore them, delete them, and report them as spam, block them. None of this kind of stuff's going to really be legit. And really, if they're going to, if it's legitimate, they'll reach out to you again, I'm sure. But I would just delete those. So one thing, in my dad's scenario, just if someone's calling you up, and they're saying that they're with Microsoft and you're not sure, or the bank or some other kind of scam like that, just hang up the phone. Again, they'll call back if it's like legit, or you can have some other avenues. If you're not sure, ask your IT person, your IT department. My dad could have said, hey, let me call my son who's in IT, instead of just going along with it. And then of course delete those text messages that you might get. Again, these are just low-tech solutions to protect yourself from high-tech scams. Next, we're going to talk about an example that came to our office from an employee. So does this email look legitimate to you? This email came in from Matt going to Sabrina, and he was just asking, hey, I would like to change my direct deposit information. It looks innocent enough. What do you guys think? Spam, not spam? It is definitely spam. So what ended up happening is Matt was just asking, so Sabrina messages me over Teams and says, hey, Matt would like to change his direct deposit information. And I'm like, okay, well, he can just log into our payroll portal and change his direct deposit information. I don't need to get involved for that. So she replies back to him, and he says, oh, I'm having a problem. Can you just do it for me? So I open up an email on my computer, not anything to do with this one, and I sent an email to our payroll department and copied Matt on the email, and I said, hey, he's having a problem getting into his payroll so that he can change his direct deposit information. Well, Matt messages me just a few minutes after that email goes out and says, hey, I didn't ask for that. So Sabrina then forwards me this email, and I take a look at it, and of course the email address is from michaelthomas323@gmail, which is not matching Matt Herring. So at that point, we knew for sure that obviously this was a scam email. Now, Sabrina, if she had noticed it to begin with, it would have stopped right then and there. But of course, we're all busy, we're not paying attention all the time. So it's very important to check for that from address and make sure that it matches. Now, some people in our company have like random Gmail addresses that they use personally. So one of them has Pizza Cat and at Gmail. And so that wouldn't really be a red flag unless you know or you looked up what their email address was in your employee register that you have. So again, be very careful about that. And how do they even know who to target? Well, if you look up on LinkedIn, you would find Sabrina, who works for us, and she's got at the time the title of bookkeeper. Well, it doesn't take too much effort to think about that and go, hey, I'm just going to log in and send a message to Sabrina here. And there's a lot of different other websites that have a lot of employment information like ZoomInfo, Reference USA, that you can look this stuff up. And it's all very good information. It's just one of those things that you're going to have to be just very careful about it. If you look here, if you click on more info on her, she even has her email address listed, which a lot of people do on LinkedIn, trying to build those business contacts together. But it just makes it very easy for her to become that target in that particular instance. And then of course I can look at other employees that are with the company and they just pick Matt as a random person and say, hey, I want to mess with him today. In fact, LinkedIn was used in over 52% of all the research for these kind of phishing scams in the first quarter of this year, first quarter. Which was up from last year. So again, it's a great website to use for business networking, but it can be used against you as well. So how do you, avoid becoming a victim in this particular case? Well, again, we need to make sure that we're looking at the from address that's there. Now, if you skip that or if it's not super obvious to you, another thing that you could have done is called him. Hey, let me pick up the phone and just call Matt. Hey, Matt, what's going on with your payroll stuff? Oh, I didn't ask for that. Oh, okay, and then she could disregard it at that point. She could have walked over to his desk. We're all in the same building. We're not remote at this point, but she could have just walked over there and just asked him, hey, what's going on with that? Could have sent a message via our internal corporate messaging systems, Teams or Slack. And of course, what ended up solving it for us is we sent a corporate email through a different channel. We broke the chain, and then we went and sent the email that way, and that's how we figured it out at that point. So again, just to recap on this, I want you to make sure that you're checking that email address. It's not always obvious, but that's one thing that you need to check. I would call, just make sure you pick up the phone, walk over to them, send them a message to confirm. And of course, if you're not sure, maybe ask your IT person. Again, these are just low-tech solutions to protect yourself from high-tech scams. What about something that's coming from an unknown person or service? So let's take a look at that. So IBM in 2021, they figured out that phishing was the most expensive and the second attack vector that they were using, with losses about $4.6 million. So I got this email. This came to my Hotmail account saying that I had some kind of Geek Squad subscription that I needed to renew. And if I didn't authorize this, to call them up and cancel it. So you can see right at the top that the email address is from Gmail, so that's obviously spam. It also says, hello, dear, so it's not even personal to me. I mean, they couldn't even make it and say, hey, look, my name is in the email address. They couldn't say, hello, Greg, at all. You know, and what's this generic Best Buy service that they're talking about? I mean, it's very odd. And then, of course, their telephone number. So if I had called the telephone number that they provided, they would, of course, ask me for my invoice number, my customer ID. Then they would have looked up my account and said, oh, well, you owe us $389. And I would have said, oh, yeah, I didn't authorize that. Okay, well, give me your bank information and we'll reverse the charges. And, of course, at that point, they got whatever they need, and then they would take money out of my account. Here's another one from Geek Squad, but this is coming from Intuit. Well, you guys, I'm sure, get invoices from Intuit all the time. I do. And we pay with Intuit. So, I mean, we bill with Intuit. But in this case, it looks a little more authentic, but it's still, this is a spam message as well. You can tell that order is misspelled at the top, ordar. We got it coming from support billing at Geek Squad. That's not going to be me again. I mean, that's some kind of distribution group or something, so it's being sent to a bajillion people. Again, it's not customized with my name. Hey, dear customer, space, comma, you know, so we don't have anything here. And again, it's kind of the same thing. So they got a telephone number, they got an amount that they want me to do, and if it's not authorized, to give them a call. But if I do a Google search on that telephone number, it comes up immediately and tells me that this is a scam. So that's one way that you can just check. You say, hey, look, I'm not expecting anything from Geek Squad, USPS, whatever. So let's go take a look and see what that telephone number really is. So, you know, and obviously some people have reported it. If you do a search on Geek Squad, you'll actually come up with a legitimate telephone number. Now, a couple things you could do is just look up in your bank register, hey, did I get an unauthorized charge on my credit card or my bank balance? And that'll tell you immediately. Otherwise, I would just chalk it up to spam and delete it. So here's another message that's saying that my Office 365 account has been suspended. So if we take a look at this one, you know, oh, and if I don't do something, I'm going to get locked out of my account. So if you look at it a little bit more, the email address is coming from mysecuritysupport.com. And if you hover over that link, it's service-no reply info. So obviously, neither one of those are Office 365. If I did click on that click here link, it would take me to a login page where I would type in my username and password. And then it would take you to this. So this is Bullfish. We happen to use internally and for our clients. It's a training simulation platform that allows you to test your employees and make sure that they are not falling for this kind of stuff. So it helps them, if they do fall for it, it would say, hey, you fell for it, and here's how you can identify this as a phishing scam. If you don't have a service like this, I would highly recommend getting one. Bullfish is one, KnowBe4 is another. So we're not sure if it's phishing or if the IT department is sending emails from Zimbabwe. You know, never know with cybersecurity. So here's a message I got that looks very fishy. It came in from Gene McSheffy, adobesign.com. So let's take a look at this. So if we hover over the link, it's also coming from Adobe Sign. So at least that kind of matches. But the email address down here at the bottom doesn't match the one at the top, so it's coming from Adobe Sign directly. So at this point, I'm just not sure, but I have a relationship with Jean, so let's go back and look at some previous emails and look up her contact information. And so I ended up reaching out to her and I say, hey, what is this Adobe Sign thing? And she's like, oh, that is actually legit. You requested some information. I need your signature on it. Please go ahead and proceed. So all I did is I just, you know, called and verified that she is who she says she is. To make sure that this is legit. And then you go there. Now, of course, I'm sure you've gotten documents from DocuSign, Adobe Sign, maybe other signature services. So if you're expecting it, that's great. But if you get something kind of unsolicited, I would definitely go back to that person and ask, hey, what is this that I'm getting? Again, these are low-tech solutions to protect yourself from high-tech scams. So again, we're going to check that email address. That's the number one thing that you need to do. Make sure you're slowing down, not in a hurry. You know, like that bank example that I gave you earlier. You know, I was in such a hurry and pissed off. You know, again, if you're not sure, reach out to your IT person or department, and they can check out some of these links and the validity of the email. You know, you could just delete it or dump it into your junk mail folder. Maybe ignore it. Those are always good examples. We get tons of emails that people send to us, our clients, and say, hey, is this legit or not? Hover over the links. Now, this doesn't work all the time, but if you hover over the link, it'll show you what's going on with that link and where it's going. Now, some anti-spam systems out there will change the link so they have link protection built in. So if you click on it, it'll test it and kind of go through that thing for you. So it's not always the best, but I would definitely hover over that if you don't have that service. I would definitely call. You know, in some scenarios, like in the Gene example, I called her up. And then definitely use some training, network training simulations, network security awareness training. All of those things are very good for your staff. If everybody would just, quit clicking on these phishing emails, we would not have a problem. That'd be great, wouldn't it? All right, so last we got one from a vendor. Let's take a look at this. So we've got this email that's coming in from John Smith, coming here to Jane. Let's see if this is a legit email or not. Well, as we take a look at it, we've got new billing details. So someone is sending this to you saying, hey, instead of paying me here, I want you to pay me on this ACH or whatever. I want you to do it ASAP. So that's another kind of red flag. And then the font, you can kind of tell the font between Kind Regards John Smith is a little different than the rest of the font of the body. Now that's not all telling because people do have fancy fonts that they use for their signature. But in this case, it looks misplaced. It's not, it's two different fonts and it's not like an actual signature. And it doesn't match the rest of it down below either. In this particular case, this is what they refer to as a spear phishing email. And the difference between regular phishing is sent out to a wide swath of people, everybody in the room. In this case, it's being targeted to a specific individual or company. So in this case, Jane was the target. So if we look at this, it's an actually spoofed email address, domain, I'm sorry. And the difference is that they used a domain that was very close in spelling to the original domain. And in this case, they just reversed the I and the E in Pied Piper to Pied Piper. You have some other examples where you could maybe add a couple of I's in the Braintek domain, maybe just swap a letter around, any kind of thing. And so when you're first at glance looking at these email addresses, like I've been telling you to do, sometimes it's a little tougher to notice. Here, if you go to this website, DNS Twist, you can actually type in a domain, hit search, and it'll come up with a list of all the variations that are out there. Some of them are taken, some of them are available. But it gives hackers a very good idea of what might be out there. So you could go up and buy some of these domains for yourself if they're close. But just so you're aware that exists out there and it's free. So on this email, this is clearly a phishing email. But what I wanted to point out is that it has this caution message on it that alerts your staff internally that this message originated from outside of the organization. So if they're trying to do some kind of spoofing, they're saying, hey, I'm the boss and I want you to buy some iTunes gift cards or whatever, but it's coming from the outside, well, that's going to be a red flag. Internal employees are not going to be doing that. So if you don't have some kind of caution message on your email, I would highly recommend enabling it. It's free, it doesn't cost anything. So this one came in, but this is not an email that came in. So this came in from a web form on our website. And Gabe here was requesting a quote on some equipment. So it seems, innocent enough. Gabe's just, Cisco Food Corp, they're a big company, right? Well, as we take a look at this a little bit more, Gabe wanted a quote on 50 laptops. I didn't have any relationship with him or the company. And he wanted to be billed net 30. So, a laptop's what, $1,000 easily? So that'd be $50,000 minimum for something like this. Well, and he wants to be on net 30. So of course, I get some laptops, send them out to him, and he doesn't end up paying me. Well, as we take a look at this, CiscoFoodCorp.com is not the legitimate website for Cisco. So what we did to figure that out is we went to a website like this, which is Google GoDaddy, and they have a Whois database that you can look up domains, and quickly you can identify if they're legitimate or not. When I looked up Cisco Food Corp at the time, the website had been, or the domain had been just registered a few days ago. So at that point you're like, aha, well this is probably not it. When I looked it up for this example, it had been released back to the public and was no longer, it was for sale again. But you can tell if a company has been around for a while. Ours was created in 2004, this domain. It was last updated in 2018 and it doesn't expire till 2025. So if you get odd requests from your website or from some place that's kind of too good to be true or just abnormal for you, I would definitely do some due diligence and kind of researching the domain and making sure that it's legit for you. So here I've got an example of a construction company that had gotten hacked. So what ended up happening is the person got into their mailbox. And then what they were doing is they kind of looked around in the construction company's accounting person's mailbox and found that they had some exchanges with one of their vendors, and one of their vendors owed them some money. So they quickly were excited about that, and they started setting up rules within Outlook to hide their tracks. And what they did is they started exchanging information with the vendor that owed them some money and said, hey, I need you to pay to a different place, like some of those other examples I mentioned. So they're like, okay, and they updated the billing, and then he asked, hey, did you send that invoice yet? And the person's like, yes, I did. And then after that, they got paid, they were all good, and they, of course, were cleaning up their tracks, deleting all the emails within the system. So the person that owned the account didn't see any of this. Well, then a couple weeks later, the construction company was like, hey, we haven't gotten paid from this vendor, so you still owe us some money. So they, of course, reach out and say, hey, what's going on with that? And they said, well, I did pay you. What are you talking about? Here's the email chain on that, and here's my bank receipt. You told me to send it over here, so I did that. And so, of course, now the construction company's out, whatever that money was. The vendor is now paid the wrong person. So whose fault is that? And how did it happen to begin with? So let's take a look. Here's one possible that could have happened, is they could have bought their credentials, the email address and password, on the dark web. So the dark web's a place where you can go as a person and sell information, and a lot of times that happens. So if you hear about some of these data breaches in the news, if they get username and password databases, and then what they do is they'll put it on the dark web for sale. And so then at that point, I could go there and look it up, and I could buy it, or I could just search for it. So in this case, this is my personal email address. I looked it up, and you can see clearly that there's some passwords on there that are not encrypted. So the ones that start with that 5349 are encrypted passwords. But some of the other ones that are in clear text, you can kind of see that that was a password that I had used at some point. So that's one possible. And then, of course, people like to reuse their passwords. So at that point, I'm going to try this combination on different various services. Passwords are like underwear. You need to change them regularly. Don't let other people see them, and certainly don't share them with anybody. In September, Uber had gotten hacked, and the group Lapsus said they bought the username and password on the dark web, and this just happened to Uber. Another method that they could have done, they just could have phished her. So they could have just sent her an email saying, hey, type in your credentials, like that Office 365 one that your account has been suspended. They go, okay, and they just type in the password, and they just give it away. And then at that point, I'm like, haha, now I've got your passwords, and I can do whatever I want with that. So how do you avoid becoming a victim? And we're going to talk about two different things here. So the vendor became a victim, so they should have actually picked up the telephone as part of their internal procedure when payment changes to call the construction company, and not using the telephone number that is listed inside the email. They need to go back to previous emails or back to their vendor directory and actually look it up. And then call them up and say, hey, you told me that I need to change my payment information. Is that accurate? They would say yes or no or whatever, and then you go, okay, great. And if it's a no, then you go, okay, well, I think maybe something's going on with your email account. I got this message. The other thing for the person that was attacked, they need to turn on two-factor or multi-factor authentication. That's the code that gets sent to you when you log into the bank and different other services. It's very common nowadays, but a lot of people still don't have it turned on. And if it's not turned on, this is an added layer of security that you can add. It's free in most cases. I would highly recommend that in that case. And Google did a study, and they found out that half of this room is reusing their passwords on a lot of websites. Half of you are reusing these passwords. And so if one site is compromised, all of those sites that you're sharing the password is compromised now. So if I've got my bank password is the same as my email password, the same as my Facebook password, and one of those gets hacked, or I give it up for some one of them, it doesn't take much effort for me to go, I wonder if that works on Chase Bank or Facebook or whatever. And all of a sudden, hey, I'm into their account. So I would highly recommend getting a password manager, having unique passwords across sites. Don't store your passwords in Chrome either. Another thing you could do with 365 and a lot of other email services is you can turn on what's called conditional access. This is about a $6 add to your 365 account. But what it allows you to do is block countries from logging into your account on 365. So what's interesting about that is you never go to Russia. Maybe you never go to China. So, well, they're known for spamming out a lot of things, so block those countries from logging into your tenant. Now, of course, if you're traveling to one of those places that you've blocked, well, your email's not going to work when you get there, so you would have to then tell the IT department, hey, I need to turn that on while I'm here, so that's a potential problem. But if that's never the case from you, block it. And so that makes it a little bit harder for people to log into your account from alternate locations. The other thing you could do is you could set up what's called zero trust. So Zero Trust is a vetted system. So I trust this laptop, I trust this phone to log into these accounts, and that's it. Now that makes it a pain in the ass for you. So if you log in with grandma's computer, then you're not gonna be able to get into your stuff, but at the same time, it adds that protection. So I got a new phone, I've got to call the IT department and vet that device, and now it's into the system and I'm allowed to get into it. So that's just one area that you can do to help protect those 365 tenant, your QuickBooks, your on-site services and whatnot. Again, most of these are low-tech solutions to protect yourself from high-tech scams. So in recap, we're going to call. So if you're a vendor getting a new email payment information, you need to pick up the phone, add that to your procedures, and call them. Make sure you've got two-factor authentication turned on at everything that's sensitive to you. So that's going to be your email, your bank, your retirement, your payroll system. Any of those systems that control money, have personal identifiable information, so medical records and whatnot. Don't reuse passwords. I would urge you to use different passwords on every website. It is a pain in the butt, but get a password manager that'll help you manage that stuff. When in doubt, of course, ask the IT department. This is too good to be true. This is odd. Looks fishy to me. Just ask them, and they'll figure it out. If you know what's going on with it. Block countries that are known for spamming from even logging into your accounts. And of course, maybe the last one here is set up a Zero Trust. So what happens if you fall victim to one of these? What are you going to do? Well, you're going to change your password. LinkedIn got hacked. I'm going to go change my password on LinkedIn. Crap, I'm using that password on 10 other websites, so I got to go change all of those too. So make sure you're not sharing those passwords. If you've entered any financial information, I sent some money with Zelle, I bought some gift cards and sent them to them. Any of those kind of things, you need to contact your bank or financial institution and talk to them about that. Hey, I just did this. What's my recourse? And sometimes you can recover your money, sometimes not, so it just kind of depends. If you gave up any social security information, anything that's really sensitive about yourself, you don't want to stop identity theft, so you're going to go lock your credit records so that someone can't open up a bank account or get a loan in your name somewhere else that you're unaware of. You may need to contact the authorities. In some breaches, that's required nowadays. It just kind of depends on your scenario, so you'd have to look into that. If any software has been installed, you want to make sure you're uninstalling that software, running malware scans to make sure that all of that is good. Definitely set up multi-factor authentication. And then lastly, you can talk to the IT department about these things. Again, these are just low-tech solutions to protect yourself from high-tech scams. I've got some time for some Q&A. Anybody have some questions for me? Go ahead.
I do, about you mentioned the password protector.
The password manager?
Password manager?
Yep.
Instead of putting it, you said don't put it on Chrome, that sort of thing. Is that software that you purchase, or what is that?
It's a website service that you would go to. So one example is LastPass, there's OnePass, there's Dashlane, there's all kinds of different ones that are out there. You would sign up for, it's like $4 or $5 a person per month. You would go there, set it up. They do have business accounts that you can use, which is really nice if you've got passwords internally you want to share with people. So I could share a password with him, and then if he leaves the company and I notice that he accessed that password, then I can go, oh, I want to go change the 5 sites that he used in the last 6 months. I can do that, so there's a lot of auditing with it. It'll also tell you if your password comes up in a breach. Oftentimes, and they'll say, hey, LinkedIn got hacked, you need to go change that password. And then you can and it'll also tell you if you're reusing them between multiple websites. So hey, my LinkedIn and my Facebook are the same password, which may or may not be a big deal, but again, if you're an influencer, that might be a big deal, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, we manage most of the clients, and the major mistake that I see is when the employees leave, companies don't delete their access from everywhere.
That's correct.
Most of the time, you probably blocked him from ERP or maybe some of the local system, but he still has gate access, he's got VPN access and a lot of things, and that is a recipe for disaster because he can probably sell it, maybe he's now careless because the audit is no longer on him, so he's just being careless.
Yeah, and if you're using a password manager, you can identify that, but it's also good to have an offboarding procedure that says, hey, I need to delete all of the accounts for these different systems, disabling access to this local server, disabling the 365 account. What am I doing with their mailbox? Turning off services. Hey, I don't want them in QuickBooks anymore because I'm using QuickBooks Online, or all those different things. That's a great point. Yeah.
I work here at Homestar. I received a call from the CFO 2 weeks ago. Because we have one login, when I responded to a Cisco voice message, opened a voice
Yeah,
So
it's tough on those kind of things, yeah.
the voice message is different, but I guess it isn't email message, right?
Well, it depends on what, this was an attachment that came in?
Yeah.
So it depends on what the attachment's objective is in terms of malware. So you can double click on it and maybe it plays you an actual message, but in the background maybe it's doing something else as well. That's, and so there's different security precautions that we would put in place to stop those kind of things from executing on your computer. So going back to the zero trust example, we have software that we put onto machines that won't even allow certain things to run. So in that example, maybe the audio would run, but whatever it's trying to do in the background would get blocked. And then it would tell you, hey, we blocked something because the software is not vetted on the machine at all. So that's what we use.
Back to the vendor and the construction company.
Yeah.
Vendor is paid, the construction company feels like they're out of money because they didn't receive it.
Correct.
Who is at fault in that situation?
To me, it's both. I think the vendor didn't do their due diligence to call the construction company to say, hey, look, the payment information has been changed. And all of us are guilty of probably doing something like that. I just trust the other person on the other side that they're giving me the right information. But really best practice is that I should call. And then of course, the construction company, they had their security was a little lax on their side, which allowed the whole incident to happen to begin with. But the same thing could happen with a spoofed email address. I could have used a Gmail and maybe faked it out. So any of those, and we see those kind of attacks all the time as well.
Specifically when they get into that person's email and do rules to another folder
Right.
and then communicate on behalf of signatures legit, emails legit, but they have rules so when the chain comes in, the owner of the email doesn't even see it because they're going into this folder they don't even know is created.
That's right.
Who's at fault?
I don't know, the insurance company guys back here might be able to actually answer that. So, but really, I couldn't see from a legal point of view if someone were to sue. I don't know the answer to that.
It's the company who's not taking proper measures to secure themselves. So you cannot say the police is at fault if you don't have ADT and proper measures at your home. So you have to do your maximum and you gotta do everything. And then you cannot assume anything. When it comes to cybersecurity, no assumptions. You don't trust no one. You do your own diligence and then you move forward.
That's right.
So they can actually sue you for getting the money because technically you did not do enough to protect yourself in that.
And then of course, people will ask a lot of times, how come the anti-spam system doesn't catch a lot of this? And so the anti-spam system, as you probably know, has a lot of false positives all the time. So it thinks this is spam, it thinks this is not. Well, a lot of them, they measure different aspects of the email, attributes within it. Hey, there's a lot of hyperlinks in it. There's a lot of weird fonts, pictures. Maybe it's got unsubscribed links in it. And so then the anti-spam system will score it higher and think that it's spam. Well, a lot of these examples were very text-based. And so those text-based ones look like just a one-on-one email that I'm sending to somebody. And so a lot of times they'll bypass the spam filters at that point, unless it's coming from someone that's a known spammer. But like Gmail, that's a big company, Google, and it can get right through a lot of that stuff. So it's just something to be careful about. Go ahead.
4 more minutes if anybody else has any more questions. I will recommend you have the app if you have other questions afterwards that you can post them there and get them answered as well.
I got one.
Go ahead.
You've worked at some large corporations, and every time I get a phishing email, like from Amazon or FedEx or whoever, I forward it to phishing at that company's. Do you think they do anything with those? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we get that stuff, we evaluate it, see if it is phishing or not. Then we'll reply back to you and let you know, hey, this is actual junk or not. And then we'll add it to the blacklist within the spam system, so that that domain that they're using or the email address that they're using is now blocked, and so other people in the organization won't get it. And some of the new AI-based anti-spam systems will actually notice that if you enough people flag something at your organization as spam, and let's say someone else in the organization hasn't read it yet, it'll pull that email out. So that's a pretty cool new feature that they're having in some of the new systems we've been seeing. No other questions?
What about text message viruses? Can you get a virus via text?
Absolutely. So we've seen things like that where maybe there's a link to download something. You click on it, it goes to the browser, downloads it, and then it can execute. So depending on the type of phone you have, iPhones have a little bit better security on that. They don't allow certain things to run, where Android's a little more open, and it'll allow all kinds of things to happen. So it just kind of depends on what's going on with that. I would definitely be careful about that kind of stuff. Well, I'd like to thank you. If you're interested in getting a security audit, you can reach out to me, give me a call, scan the QR code, and of course, you're checking those URLs in the QR code, right, when you go to it, because that's the same thing. I mean, it's hidden. You can't tell where that's going, so make sure it's going to where you expect it to go. Thank you, guys. You have a great afternoon.